Before mounting ProEM, check the RFS for the filter selection. Observers using the Johnson-Bessel UBVRI system usually want the 1 mm thick BVR filter installed in position 1 of the manual filter wheel. Otherwise, position 1 must be left empty to use the FLI filters. It's possible to make the change without dismounting ProEM, but that procedure is in a separate video. After ProEM is mounted and connected, turn on the camera with the rocker switch on the separate control box. This switches the camera only and has no effect on the FLI wheel or its host computer, a POC120 inside the box. The POC120 simply boots when the system is plugged into mains power. Finally, pull the blocking knob on the manual wheel full out. With the shutter and blocking filter on ProEM, there's no reason to push it in. Back in the control room, start Argos Dev if necessary, and log in using the credentials on the back of the computer. Start the Trimble Timekeeper software. Open the Trimble folder from the desktop link, and start Trimble VTS.exe as administrator by right-clicking on the icon and selecting Run as Administrator. Make sure the status is Timekeeper On, COM1. You can minimize the Trimble window to the taskbar, but do not close it. Start Real VNC Viewer. Connect to the POC120 on 10.10.10.1 with credentials given on the back of the computer. If you were directed to loop back to this point to troubleshoot the filter wheel, go out to the instrument, power cycle the FLI wheel from its power cord, and reseat the USB connector. And reboot the POC120 from the Windows Start menu. Continuing with the normal startup, launch TCP-COM from the desktop. Click the Activate button and check for COM status open and TCP/IP status listening or connected. If there's an error in the COM or TCP/IP status, loop back to the troubleshooting advice just mentioned, where you go out to the instrument. If you can't get past this step, the observer will not have control of the filter wheel and it will need to be moved manually. We'll assume that you got it working. You can now close the Real VNC remote desktop window. If you accidentally shut down the POC120 computer instead of rebooting it, go out to the dome, use the flashlight to peer into the case, and you'll see the front panel of the POC120. It's the same as Prometheus in the control room in the cold start instructions. The inset power button is on the right, and you'll need a long, thin stick to press it. Alternately, you could power cycle the entire instrument package from the mains power cord. Start light field from the default experiment icon. Never start light field directly. It can come up in electron multiplication mode, which can destroy the sensor if exposed to bright light. Never change the default experiment settings. When quitting, light field will ask you if you want to save changes. Always say no. If light field complains about its HASP license key located on a backside USB port, try a full shutdown and power-up cycle, not just a reboot. You may need to do this several times. It's unclear if moving the HASP USB key to another port helps, but if you elect to try this, make sure the computer is off before moving it. Switch to the filter wheel control tab. The 8 positions on the disk should be populated with block, BG40, UGRIZ, and empty. Test the wheel rotation and leave it on block. If the filter wheel disk is not populated with the filter names, or you get an error message from Lightfield, go back to the step where you started the real VNC viewer to the POC120 host computer and repeat these steps. The ping button in Lightfield's filter wheel tab may say the connection seems good even when it's not. The only way to know it's working is to check that the disk is populated with the filter names and you can select filters. Switch back to the View tab and take a few single exposures to test the camera and the trigger interface. If it doesn't trigger, try reseating the BNC connector near the camera. Argos and Etsy use a so-called file camera to guide 82 by providing their science images, which typically have a stride of 1 to 20 seconds, to a Windows network share on the Z drive, so you'll need to set up the Track82 computer in the control room for this share. Left-click on the Windows Start icon and left-click on the computer item in the right column. If the share is already made, you'll see a disk icon with a green data channel for the Z share, and you're done. Just double-click the icon to make sure the folder opens. If the drive is not mapped, you'll either see nothing or you'll see a red X for the Z share. In this case, left-click the Windows Start icon, right-click on Computer, and map the Z drive to the address shown using the credentials on the back of Argos Dev. After the mapping, double-click the Z drive, which still has a red X, to make sure it opens. Finally, back in Lightfield, make sure the shutter is always closed and the sensor temperature is -55 degrees C and locked. ProEM is now ready for the observer.